INNOPATHS project is a project funded by the European Commission under its Horizon 2020 programme. It consists of 15 institutes from different European countries, and our focus is very much on innovation for moving towards a very low carbon society, for decarbonisation.
The first step in the INNOPATHS project will be to study the anatomy of previous studies that have looked at how to move to a more sustainable energy system. So this first part will look at both the technical, economic, social and other environmental dimensions of the transition, and we'll make sure that we build on the best and add to the existing knowledge in how to do this.
The INNOPATHS project will also examine innovation systems, both at the EU level and at the level of selected member states. This analysis will be carried out for key sectors. These include power, industry, ICT, buildings, transport and agriculture. These sectors have been selected either because of their high greenhouse gas emissions or because they have a lot of abatement potential. The analysis we're going to be carrying out aims at identifying the drivers and constraints to innovation for the low-carbon transition.
The transition to a low-carbon economy in Europe will require massive investments. Renewable energy technologies like wind and solar, they are very capital-intensive. They require high upfront investment, which will only be compensated by lower operating expense as compared to fossil fuel over time. For power generation alone, the investment gap is estimated as some $300 billion per year. And that's clearly beyond what public finance can reasonably achieve alone. So from the finance perspective, INNOPATHS will describe pathways, how to ensure sufficient resources for a low-carbon transition by mobilizing private finance effectively, fast enough and in a sustainable way.
You know that if we want to decarbonize, we have to use and to develop renewable energy sources. But to do that, we have to implement storage systems for energy that must be developed under a functional but above all an economic point of view. In this moment such systems are not so achievable.
What we see for the transportation sector is that multiple solutions will be required. The transportation sector has a wide range from small vehicles like bicycles, pedelecs, over cars, trains, buses, trucks, to heavy freight trucking or even airplanes or ships. And likely different types of solutions will be needed for the different submodes in the transportation sector.
When we talk about ICT, there are literally thousands of solutions in the market, and people that have the responsibility to take decision, to choose and to select the best one and the one that fit for the organization usually get confused. Implementing an energy management system is the right way to select the best technology and the best management practice in order to achieve saving, and energy saving always pay for investment.
For building sector, there are a particular set of challenges which might not be applicable to the others. One of the things as a practitioner in the field I've come across is the gap, if you like, or a big divide between CapEx and OpEx. This is the capital expenditure and operational expenditure, which really what it translates into the people who are developing the building and to be sold on are not particularly interested in how energy efficient it is, because the benefits of this, including economic benefits of this, are going to be reaped by the people who use the building and who buy the building. And there's a gap between this sort of who invests and who benefits. In terms of historical buildings, there's another layer of complexity, if you like, because a lot of measures that you would normally implement to improve performance of the buildings might not be possible, and this is very much so for the entire European Union. It has disproportionate amount of historic cities and historic villages, even historic buildings, and they are protected inside and out. And it's really challenging what you do in this situation.
There are ultimately
limits to how far you can reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the agricultural sector. Agricultural emissions are predominantly actually not carbon dioxide, but other greenhouse gases, nitrous oxide, which is coming from labile nitrogen in the soil, and methane, which is coming from ruminant animal digestive systems. And these are biological processes which are difficult to modify, and so ultimately there are probably technical limits beyond which it will not be possible to further reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This is not to say, though, that there are not many opportunities for innovation in improving the efficiency of agricultural production and progressively reducing the greenhouse gas footprint of agricultural products.
So, the EU has set a very ambitious target to reduce climate emissions by at least 80% until 2050, which requires a full-scale transformation of the energy system. And INNOPATH will try to contribute to this by analyzing pathways how to achieve this transformation.
4 of the major products from the research will be 4 different online tools. One will be a technology matrix with all that we have discovered about the decarbonization technologies and how they might develop into the future. One will be a policy assessment framework so that policymakers and other people who are interested in the kinds of policies that will need to be introduced to have decarbonization, they can get some idea as to how these policies have been introduced before and what sort of effectiveness they've had, how much have they cost, and how easy were they to do. Then we're going to have very much an interactive low carbon pathways platform so that people can experiment for themselves as to the sorts of deployments of these technologies that will be needed, the deployments of the policies that will be needed in order to decarbonize. And then we'll bring it all together with the full scenarios. That will be another online tool so that people can get as much insight as possible into the scenarios that we've constructed, how they've come about, the kinds of lifestyles that people will be living under in those terms, what sorts of technologies they'll be using across these different sectors.